Hello and welcome. My name is Kelly Poto and I'm joined by my colleague Galen Hare. And today we're here to talk with you about cybersecurity trends that are impacting the industries and regions from a financial standpoint. As you are well aware, cybersecurity threats are impacting uh, uh, businesses all across the world. They cause significant financial risk and they impact more than just, again, local markets. They are from a global standpoint. It is our theory that these incidents are becoming increasing, and that is what our presentation focuses on, is there data to support our theory that cybersecurity incidents are increasing, and could that information feed into executive decision making to better support industries? So the goal of our analysis is, as I stated, we're evaluating the impact of cyber attacks across these industries and regions, and trying to determine if it's indicative of an organizational risk increasing over time. So what our analysis will be guided by are these 5 questions. And the overall question is cybersecurity a financial impact happening and increasing year over year? And these questions will support our trend analysis. The first being, I'm going to read them directly from the screen. The first being, which industries experience the highest financial impact from cyber attacks? What types of cyber attacks result in the greatest financial losses? How do these financial impacts of cybersecurity vary? The cyber attacks vary per geographic region and where the company is headquartered. And how have cyber attacks related to financial impacts changed over time? Do these trends indicate that there's increasing risk? And finally, does disclosure of a cyber incident affect the stock market reaction in any way? And if so, how? And from here, I will hand it over to my colleague, Galen.
Thanks, Kelly. So before we get into the analysis, let's walk through what we're actually working with. Our data set is the Cyber Attacks Financial and Market Impact data set from Kaggle. It documents 850 cyber incidents between 2021 and 2025. And importantly, these are simulated or synthetic events. They're built from publicly disclosed reports, SEC filings, verified media coverage, and company disclosures. The data actually comes as related tables. There's an incidents master table, which is the core, 1 row per attack with the company, industry, country, attack type, and dates. Then a financial impact table with the dollar figures, direct losses, recovery costs, legal fees, fines, and a total loss figure. That's also inflation adjusted. And then we have a market impact table with stock price behavior around the disclosure date. One thing worth noting up front is not every incident has every kind of data. 778 of the 850 have financial figures, but only 358 have market data. And that's not missing data. It's because only publicly traded companies have a stock price. So we'll come back to that when we talk about the market reaction. Next slide, please. So how did we shape this data for analysis? The extract step was straightforward. There are 3 CSV files loaded into Power BI. Transformation is where the real work was. First, industry classification. Industries in the raw data are coded as NICS sector codes, so think 52, 62, etc. So we had to map these numbers to actual industries, such as finance and insurance for 52 and healthcare for 62, making the charts more readable for users. Second, geography. The data gives us a 2-letter country code for each company's headquarters. We created a country to region mapping so we could roll the 38 countries up into regions like North America, Europe, and Asia and Pacific, and still drill back down to country level when we need to. Third and last was our dates, of course. We built a dedicated date dimension covering the full 21 to 25 range and marked it as our official date table. That's what makes the reliable year-over-year analysis possible within our data set. Next slide, please. And here we see how it all fits together. What you're looking at is a star schema. At the center is the incidents master table, it's the hub. Every other table connects through it on the incident ID. Hanging off it are our two fact tables, financial impact, holding all the monetary measures, and market impact, holding the stock market measures. Then we have our different dimensions, the date table and the country to region mapping, which let us slice everything by the time and the geography. We deliberately model the relationships as one-to-many with single direction filter flowing from the incidence hub into the fact tables. What that means practically is that when you filter by industry or attack type, that filter flows cleanly into both financial and the market numbers at the same time. On top of this model, we built 17 DAX measures, approximately 17 DAX measures, including totals, averages, medians, year-over-year changes, statistical, significant rates, and other things. And those measures are what drive the visuals within our report. So with that foundation set, I hand it back over to Kelly for our first three questions.
Thanks, Galen. So this graphic, we are answering the question, which industries experience the highest financial impact from cyber attacks? And as you can see, this includes the incident count, the incident average, and the incident count, the average loss, and the total loss by industry. And this data is indicative that the information sector down here is the most attacked vector or business at a 12 billion total per total in that period of time from the 2021 to the 2025. The average incident is $101 million when it comes to these attacks. And again, our data shows that the healthcare industry and the healthcare industry and finance are close second and third, but by far and away, the biggest incidents are happening in the information sectors. The next question that we had is what types of loss what types of cybersecurity cyber attacks result in the greatest financial losses? And as you can see from this screen, the yellow dot indicates that cyber ransomware attacks are definitely happening. They are probably the most numerous far and away, but they are not the most costly. The most costly are these backdoor. As you can see, they are not happening as frequently, but they are very much more costly when they do occur. What we're seeing in this is that we're facing internal factors that indicate that we need to be doing more internally to educate our workforces, to let them know of the various types of attacks and vectors of attacks that are out there that can affect us. And then this third slide is how does the financial impact of cybersecurity vary per region, geographically and by headquarters? And what this graphic illustrates is that attacks are concentrated mostly in North and South America and Europe. And that's very interesting from our standpoint. We see that there are fewer attacks happening in Africa and Asia. Now, as Galen pointed out, we're dealing with publicly traded companies for the most part that are disclosing this information. And with public and private companies, maybe these incidents are not happening the same in Asia or in Africa. That is definitely something that with more time, there's a limitation in this particular project in that we don't have the time to dive more into why some of these might be happening. But as you can see, incidents are definitely focused in North, South America and Europe with way fewer incidents happening in Asia and Africa. Again, we'd like to dive into that a little bit more and why that's happening, but it definitely indicates that focus should maybe be, if you are an international company, you should maybe focus your cyber efforts in North America, South America, and Europe versus maybe putting them towards Asia and Africa at this moment in time based on the data set that we have. And with that, I'll hand it over to my colleague.
Thanks, Kelly. So we've seen which industries, which attack types, and where they are. The next question is this getting worse over time? And this is a question where we have to be careful. Total losses in our data absolutely rise year over year, no question. But so does the number of incidents. 131 in 2021, climbing every single year to 229 in 2025. So rising totals could just mean more attacks in the data sets, not necessarily worse attacks. If you want to claim risk is increasing, we have to separate volume from severity. And that's what this chart does. The columns are the number of incidents per year. That's the volume. And you can see it rises every year without exception. The line is the average loss per incident adjusted for inflation, and that's our severity. The inflation adjustment matters. Without it, part of any upward trend would just be measuring the fact that $1 in 2025 buys less than $1 in 2021, which I'm sure. Now, the severity line isn't a straight climb. Average per incident losses started at around 69 million in 2021, spiked about 90 million in 2022, pulled back to 64 million in 2023, and then climbed again through 2024 and 2025 to roughly 79 million. Volatile year to year, but the direction is up. Per incident losses grew an average of about 6% per year in constant dollars, seen in our card to the right. And when you put the two together, the picture sharpens, it becomes more clear. Total real losses grew an average of 22% per year. We can say exactly where that comes from. Mostly rising volume with genuinely rising per incident severity on top of it. So the answer is yes. The trend indicates increasing risk and it's growing from both directions at once. Next slide, please. Our last question focuses on when a company discloses a cyber attack. How does the stock market respond? Of course, first we have to remind ourselves of the scope. This analysis covers the 358 incidents involving publicly traded companies because private companies don't have a stock price. And that's the 42% you see on the coverage card, and we're upfront about that. Second, we didn't just look at whether the stock price dropped, because a stock can drop on any given day for any given reason. Instead, we used abnormal returns, the stock's movement minus what its own sector did over the same period. That isolates the part of the drop that's actually attributable to the incident. And here's what we found. On average, disclosure produces a 3% abnormal drop within one day. That's 3 points worse than the company's own sector. And it's not noise. In 18% of cases, which is nearly 1 in 5, the drop was statistically significant, meaning too large to explain by that stock's normal volatility. Then there's the recovery. On average, it took about 110 days for the price to return to pre-incident levels. That's not just a bad afternoon, that's more than a full quarter of depressed value. And the market doesn't punish all attacks equally. If we look at the bar chart, APT attacks, which are advanced persistent threats, drew the sharpest reaction at around minus 5.5%, with ransomware and supply chain attacks close behind. At the other end of the chart, we see DDoS attacks barely move the needle at around minus 1%. The market seems to price the severity of the compromise. Attacks that suggest deep, prolonged access get punished hardest, while temporary outages are largely shrugged off. So does disclosure affect the market? Yes, measurably, significantly, and for months. Next slide, please. So let's pull the 5 questions back into one story. Which industries? Information tops the list at around $12 billion in losses, and it's not just because it gets attacked most, it's high on both frequency and severity. Which attacks? It depends on how you ask the question. Ransomware drives the biggest total, nearly 13 billion. But per incident, backdoor attacks are the most expensive. And as we just saw, the market fears APT attacks the most. There are 3 different words based on how you look at it. Where the volume is overwhelmingly in the US, but the costliest individual incidents happen in Europe. Over time, attack volume rose every single year without question. Real total losses grew an average of 22% per year, and even per incident severity trended up about 6%. year. Exposure is growing on both fronts. And when it all becomes public, when these companies disclose, the market notices there's a 3% abnormal drop in a day, statistically significant in nearly 1 in 5 cases, and about 110 days before the price recovers. Put together, that's our main answer. Cyber attacks aren't just an IT problem, they're a measurable growing financial risk. And for what that means for real business decisions, I hand it over to Kelly.
Thanks, Galen. So the business implications of the trend analysis have indicated 4 overall implications that decision makers should be investing their time and efforts into. The first is they need to prioritize cybersecurity investments based on that financial exposure. Organizations that are in high loss sectors, particularly in the information industry, they should allocate greater resources to prevention, detection, and response capabilities in an effort to reduce the financial impact. Next, they should be focusing on the defenses to combat the most costly attack vectors. And in that respect, while ransomware generates the largest overall losses, the higher per incident costs of the backdoor attacks suggest that organizations should be strengthening monitoring, access controls, and threat hunting capabilities in an effort to reduce those attack vectors. Third, we've got the use of geographical risk information to determine strategic resource allocation. So businesses operating in regions that have the higher per incident losses should consider enhanced security controls, a regional risk assessment, and cyber insurance coverage that is tailored to their particular attack vectors. And as we saw, for example, if you are an international company and you are based out of Africa, let's say, but you are operating in Europe and North and South America, then you're going to want to pay more attention to those areas geographically that experience higher incidents of attack. And then finally, businesses and decision makers need to treat cybersecurity as a business and financial risk. It can no longer just be a technical risk. And with rising losses over time, combined with if it is a publicly traded company, the stock price declined, there's a lengthy period of recovery. These all highlight the need for executive oversight, incident response planning, and the ability for crisis communication, and of course, resilience in the face of any incidents like this happening. What that brings us to is our conclusion. And what we have found through this is that to answer our main question, are incidents increasing, or does the data indicate that there are cyber attacks increasing across vectors, all business vectors? And we have shown that they are. Cybersecurity incidents are creating financial risk for organizations, and financial losses per incident have risen consistently since 2021, increasing by average of 22% of real losses per year. This suggests that cyber attacks are becoming more costly and potentially more disruptive to the business process. Second, we've got the impact of cyber attacks varies significantly by industry, attack type, and geography. The information industry experienced over this last 5-year period or 4-year period the largest overall losses generated by ransomware, and again, greatest total financial damage. However, the backdoor attacks result in the highest losses per incident. And again, they are a smaller subset of that attack vector, but they are much more costly for a business. So organizations need to start tailoring their cybersecurity investments to their specific risk profile. It can no longer be a one size fits all. And then finally, we've got cyber attacks have a measurable consequence beyond immediate financial losses. incident disclosures associated with an average one-day stock price that falls roughly 3% as soon as the organization has announced that it has happened. Again, we are clarifying that this is only for organizations that are publicly disclosed, or I'm sorry, publicly traded with a stock price. There are a good chunk of folks in or privately owned companies that are within this that have been attacked, but we do not have that level of information. So these findings indicate that cyber incidents affect investor confidence, your business reputation, and the long-term organizational preparedness and response planning that uh, business decision makers need to take on and be prepared to address, not just from a your standard business organization workings, but now you need to bring in, it's not just a technical aspect, it's now a business and financial risk for cybersecurity, not to be a top priority for any organization. This is the conclusion of our presentation. Galen and I would like to thank you for your time and have a great day.